She slipped the note across the table during the cake cutting, and for a second I thought it was a birthday card. It wasn't. 4 words, written in her neat accountant's handwriting on the back of a cocktail napkin. Don't sign anything tonight. I looked up. Irene was already looking away, laughing at something my son-in-law said, her wineglass raised. She looked perfectly relaxed, like she hadn't just handed me a warning that would unravel the next 6 months of my life. I folded the napkin and put it in my shirt pocket. My name is Ted Calloway, though most people who've known me for more than a decade just call me Cal. I'm 68 years old, retired after 31 years as a high school history teacher in Dayton, Ohio. I coached Davy baseball for 22 of those years. I've never been particularly wealthy, but I was comfortable. I owned my house outright, had a pension, Social Security, and a modest IRA that I'd been careful with since my wife Lorraine passed 7 years ago. Not rich, but solid. The kind of solid that takes a lifetime to build. My daughter Cassandra had organized the party herself, my 72nd birthday. She'd reserved the back room at a restaurant I'd loved for years, invited about 15 people, old colleagues, a few neighbors, my brother and his wife driving up from Columbus. Irene had been invited because she did the bookkeeping for Cassandra's catering business. She'd been to a few family events before. Quiet, efficient, always a little on the periphery of things. I didn't know her well. I knew her well enough to notice that she didn't look relaxed at all. The party ended around 9. People hugged me, told me I didn't look a day over 60, handed me cards I'd read later. Cassandra held my arm in the parking lot, walked me to my car, kissed my cheek. She smelled like the perfume Lorraine used to wear, which she knew, and which I could never quite tell her bothered me. "Drive safe, Dad," she said. "And don't forget, Sunday we're meeting with the attorney about the trust paperwork. 2 o'clock. I told her I'd be there. I drove home, made a cup of decaf, sat at my kitchen table, and unfolded the napkin again. Don't sign anything tonight. I'd already signed nothing. But the word tonight implied she'd been expecting me to, which meant something had been planned. I didn't sleep much that night. I should tell you about Cassandra's husband because he matters here. His name is Boyd Merritt. She'd met him 4 years ago through some networking event for small business owners. He was in commercial real estate, or said he was. Tall, handsome in a particular way that always seemed a little too aware of itself. He called me sir the first 3 times we met, then switched to Cal without asking, which I noticed but let go. He had the kind of charm that operates on a timer. Turned on when needed, off when not. I'd seen that type before. 30 years of teaching teenagers, you learn to read people. Lorraine had met him once, at the beginning of their relationship, just before she got too sick. She'd pull me aside afterward and said, "He reminds me of someone who's always calculating the tip before the meal arrives." I hadn't known what to make of that then. I thought about it a lot later. In the 2 years after Lorraine died, Cassandra was attentive in a way that felt genuine at first. She called often, stopped by on Sundays, helped me clear out some of Lorraine's things when I was ready. I was grateful. I was also lonely in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not the grief loneliness, which I'd prepared for in the abstract, but the everyday kind, the kind where you make too much coffee and have no one to pour the second cup for. About 18 months after Lorraine passed, Boyd started joining the Sunday visits. He'd pour himself into my armchair, ask about my finances in ways that sounded casual but never quite were. "Have you thought about what happens to the house if something happens to you? You know probate is brutal in Ohio. My buddy's dad went through it, cost the family 40 grand in legal fees, that kind of thing." Presented his concern, filed carefully away in my head as something else. Then Cassandra brought up the trust. A living trust, she explained, would let her manage things smoothly if I ever became incapacitated. She had a whole folder, printed articles, a pamphlet from an estate planning firm in downtown Dayton. "Dad, what if you had a stroke? What if your memory started going? You wouldn't want the state deciding what happens to everything you built." It made sense on the surface. I was 72, not 82, and my memory was fine. I still did the crossword in pen, but I understood the logic. I told her I'd think about it. Boyd said the attorney they'd found was excellent, very experienced with situations like mine. I told him I'd probably want to use the attorney I already knew, a man named Greenfield I'd worked with when Lorraine died. Boyd said Greenfield was good, but probably not up to date on current trust structures. He said it with a smile. I said I'd think about it. After the birthday party, I waited 2 days before I called Irene. I found her numbers through the business card Cassandra had given me once, back when I'd had a question about whether I could deduct something from my taxes. Irene picked up on the third ring, and when I told her who I was, there was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "I was wondering if you'd call," she said. We met at a diner near her office. She ordered coffee and didn't touch it. She was a careful talker, the kind of person who chooses words the way you'd choose footing on an icy sidewalk. But what she told me came out clearly enough. She did the books for Cassandra's catering business, had been doing them for 2 years. In the past 8 months, she'd noticed irregularities, payments going to a vendor she couldn't verify, an LLC that had been formed in my name that she'd stumbled across while cross-referencing some filings, an LLC called Callaway Asset Holdings, LLC, registered in the state of Ohio. I had not formed any LLC. She showed me a printout she'd brought in a plain manila envelope. The registration was dated 14 months earlier. The registration was listed as Boyd Merritt. The member, the owner, on paper, was Theodore R. Callaway. Me. How? I asked. It came out quieter than I expected. She didn't know exactly. But she'd seen the signature page, and she'd seen enough documents in her career to have questions about whether that signature was mine. "I've been trying to figure out what to do for 2 months, she said. "I know Cassandra is your daughter. I know this is—" She stopped, started again. "I have a father, too." She slid a second sheet across the table. It was a credit line, $95,000, taken out against that LLC. The collateral listed was my home address, my house, the house Lorraine and I had paid off in 2019, the house where Cassandra had grown up, where I'd hung a tire swing from the old oak tree, where I still kept Lorraine's recipe box on the kitchen counter because I couldn't bring myself to move it. I sat there for a moment looking at that address in print. "There's more," Irene said. "I think Sunday was supposed to be when you signed the trust documents." The way Boyd described them to Cassandra, I overheard part of a phone call. I wasn't trying to, but the way he described them, I don't think they're standard trust paperwork. I asked her what she thought they were. "I think they're documents that would give Cassandra full fiduciary authority," which, combined with the LLC and the credit line. She stopped again, looked at her coffee. "I think they're setting up a situation where everything you have could be moved, legally, and there'd be very little you could do about it afterward." I drove home and sat in the driveway for 15 minutes before I could go inside. I want to be honest about something, because I think it matters. My first instinct was not to call the police. My first instinct, and I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth, was to call Cassandra. I wanted her to tell me Irene was wrong. I wanted an explanation that made sense. I wanted my daughter back, the one who'd sat with me in the hospital waiting room the night Lorraine died, who'd held my hand and said nothing because there was nothing to say. I wanted that person to be real. I picked up my phone 3 times, put it down 3 times, put it down 3 times. Then I called a man named Whitfield, who'd been an attorney for 40 years and had the kind of unhurried manner that made you feel like nothing you told him would shock him. I'd gotten his name from my friend Ray, the same Ray from my teaching days, who'd been through a business dispute and come out the other side with his house intact. Whitfield answered my call himself. That was a good sign. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "Before Sunday, I need you to pull your credit report, your IRA statements, and I want the name of the county recorder's office where your property is registered. Can you do that today?" I could. The credit report showed the $95,000 line, also a second inquiry I hadn't authorized, from a leasing company in Cincinnati that I'd never heard of. My IRA was untouched. They hadn't gotten there yet, or hadn't figured out how. My property title showed no changes, which Whitfield said was the only genuinely good news. He connected me with someone at the Ohio Attorney General's office, a woman named Garvey, who handled elder financial exploitation cases. I want to be careful here because people always ask, why didn't you just blurt it all out at Sunday dinner? Why not confront them? And the answer Garvey gave me was plain and practical. If I tipped them off, Boyd especially, the money in that LLC could be moved out of the country, or at minimum into accounts that would take years to untangle. The credit line could be drawn down. Documents could disappear. She'd seen it happen. They needed time to work. She asked me to do something very difficult. She asked me to go to Sunday's meeting and not sign anything, without letting them know I knew. I told her I'd do my best. Sunday came the way. Bad days always do. Too bright, Birds making too much noise outside, coffee tasting fine. I drove to Cassandra's house. She'd set up the dining room table with papers spread out, 2 chairs angled toward a third where, presumably, I'd sit. The attorney was a man named Stokes. Young, pressed shirt, the particular confidence of someone hired to appear neutral but wasn't. He shook my hand and called me Mr. Calloway, which I appreciated and trusted approximately 0%. Boyd was in the kitchen. I could hear him in there, making noise with dishes, the way someone makes noise with dishes when they want to seem like they're not paying close attention to something. We sat down. Stokes explained the documents: a revocable living trust, a durable power of attorney, a healthcare directive, all reasonable documents on their own. He slid the stack toward me. I picked up the pen. I held it. Then I put it down. "I want to bring these to my own attorney first," I said. "Standard thing. I'm sure you understand." Cassandra's face changed. It was fast, just a flicker, and then she was smiling again. But I saw it. 22 years of watching teenagers' faces when they know they're caught. I saw it. Boyd came in from the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel, casual as anything. "Cal, Stokes is one of the best in the business. I've known him for 6 years. You don't need to." "I understand that," I said. "I'd still like to have Whitfield look them over first, probably a couple days." There was a conversation after that. Reasonable sounding, from the surface. Stokes said there was no rush. Boyd said, of course, take your time, no pressure. Cassandra hugged me at the door and said she just wanted to make sure I was protected. I sat in my car in their driveway and felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not anger. Not even sadness, exactly. Just a kind of grief. The specific grief of realizing that a person you've loved for a lifetime has been, for at least some part of that time, looking at you and seeing something other than their father. I gave myself 3 minutes. Then I drove to the gas station 2 blocks away and called Garvey. What happened over the following 6 weeks, I won't drag you through in detail because the legal part is exhausting to live and probably exhausting to hear, but the shape of it matters. The LLC had been opened using a notarized signature that Whitfield's analysis and eventually the state's concluded was likely forged. Boyd had a contact, someone who'd done this before, apparently, in other contexts. The credit line had been partially drawn down. $34,000 had moved through a series of transfers before landing in an account connected to a property Boyd was developing in Cincinnati. The AG's office traced it. It took a while, but they traced it. The lease inquiry on my credit, the one from the Cincinnati company I didn't recognize, turned out to be for commercial kitchen equipment, for Cassandra's business, which she may or may not have known was being financed using my name. That part, I genuinely don't know. Her attorney argued she was unaware. The state's attorney wasn't fully convinced. I don't know what the truth is there, and I've had to make a kind of peace with not knowing. Boyd was arrested on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't there. Garvey called me afterward. Cassandra was not arrested. She was interviewed extensively. There were conditions placed on the business, audits, restrictions. She didn't go to prison. I don't know how I feel about that, and I've stopped trying to decide. The $34,000 was partially recovered. Not fully. Boyd's attorney negotiated a restitution agreement as part of his plea deal. He'll pay it back over years. And whether he actually does is a question I've handed entirely to the courts because I can't afford to spend the rest of my life waiting on Boyd Merritt. I had to close several accounts and open new ones. I had Whitfield review every document I'd signed in the previous 2 years. I put a credit freeze on all 3 bureaus, which Garvey told me to do and which I tell everyone I know to do now, regardless of their situation. The house is still mine. I think about that a lot. The house where I hung the tire swing, where Lorraine's recipe box still sits on the kitchen counter. Mine. People ask me about Cassandra now when they know the story. Whether I've talked to her. Whether I've forgiven her. The honest answer is that I've talked to her twice, briefly, the attorneys mostly. The second conversation was without attorneys. She called me on a Thursday evening, and I picked up because I always pick up when she calls, even now. Which probably tells you something about the particular stubbornness of a parent's love. She cried. She said she was sorry. She said Boyd had told her the trust documents were standard and she believed him. She said she hadn't known about the LLC. She said a lot of things that might be true. I listened. I didn't hang up. I didn't tell her I believed her, because I don't know if I do. I didn't tell her I didn't, because I don't know that either. What I told her was that I needed time. She said she understood. I'm not sure she does, but she said it. Here's what I know at 68 years old. What I know now, sitting in my kitchen with the second cup of coffee I make for myself every morning, even though there's no one to pour it for. I know that I am not confused. I know that the people who love you are not always the people who want good things for you. I know that a signature is not a small thing. It is a lever. And once someone else holds the lever, moving it back is the work of months and thousands of dollars and more dignity than it should cost. I know that Irene, who had no obligation to me whatsoever, looked at a cocktail napkin and 4 words and chose to be a decent human being. I think about that more than I think about Boyd. I think about that more than I think about what Cassandra did or didn't know. I sent Irene a card a few months after everything settled. A simple one. Just said thank you and that I hoped her father was doing well. She wrote back. He was. She was glad I'd called. I still coach some baseball, informally at the rec center on Saturday mornings. Kids 7 to 10, mostly. They don't care how old I am. They just want someone to throw the ball. Some mornings, standing out there on that grass, I feel something close to fine. I'll take that. I keep thinking about that cocktail napkin. 4 words. The handwriting wasn't dramatic, just neat, a little hurried. The kind of thing you'd write if you had maybe 30 seconds and weren't sure you were doing the right thing. Irene had every reason to say nothing. She wasn't my accountant. She wasn't my friend, not really. She had a client relationship with my daughter, a paycheck that depended on staying quiet, and exactly 0 obligation to an old retired history teacher she barely knew. What she did took something, a kind of moral backbone that doesn't get talked about enough because it's not flashy. It doesn't come with a moment of obvious triumph. It comes with risk and uncertainty and the knowledge that you might be wrong, and you do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. I think about the contrast between that and what Boyd did. Boyd was smart, genuinely smart. The kind of organized, patient intelligence that could have built something real. He understood legal structures, financial instruments, the way trust worked between a parent and a child. He used all of it not to create anything, but to take. And here's what I've come to understand about that. Not from bitterness, but from just watching how it all played out. That kind of intelligence without integrity doesn't hold. It looks like a plan, but it's actually a house of cards. Every document he forged was another card. Every lie he told Cassandra, every signature he faked, every account he touched, more cards. And all it took was one woman with a clear conscience and a cocktail napkin to start the collapse. What protected me in the end wasn't luck. I want to be clear about that because people say you were lucky Irene was there. And I understand why they say it, but I don't think it's quite right. What protected me was that I'd spent a lifetime paying attention to people, to the small things they reveal when they think you're not watching. Boyd's smile, that was always just slightly too ready. The way he'd answer a question about my finances before Cassandra could. The way the word confused came up just often enough in the wrong contexts. I noticed those things. I filed them. I didn't act on them fast enough, but when the moment came, when I was sitting across from an attorney named Stokes with a pen in my hand, something in me stopped. 31 years of reading a room will do that. And then there was the harder part. The part that's still not finished, if I'm honest. Getting back on your feet at 68, after something like this, is not a small thing. There's the legal work, which is exhausting and expensive and humbling in ways I didn't anticipate. There's the paperwork, the phone calls, the credit agencies, the accounts. There's the moment you realize you have to start some things over. I won't pretend that's easy. It isn't. But I also think there's something that only becomes available to you on the other side of a hard thing, if you're willing to walk through it instead of around it. A kind of steadiness. Not happiness exactly. Just the knowledge that you handled it, that you didn't fold, that the house is still yours and your name is still clean and you made it through. I still make too much coffee every morning. I still coach those kids on Saturday, and I still feel something close to fine out there on that grass. That's enough. That has to be enough. And mostly it is.